So we're also just back from a little 1,000-kilometre jaunt into the countryside just southwest of here, just to make sure everything works, everything's functioning correctly before we go to Tasmania in a month or so. Very excited. Excellent. So this is pretty similar to a trip we did in September after I finished work, and that trip got cut short just due to the weather forecast looking like it was going to rain a lot more, and the forecast turned out to be true. Most of those roads were cut within a fortnight of us getting home, so coming home was the right thing to do. So I got a reasonable little comparison of how the car has performed across those two trips. So we went and fueled up on a Sunday night, or on the Sunday night. There's anything up to 5 service stations here in Toowoomba that are participating in a spirited price game. At the time, the day price was 169.9, 172.9. For most service stations, there's one that's been up to $2. But post 6 or 7 o'clock through about 4 a.m, they were dropping their price at that time to 166.3, and of late 160.9, although the thirst for 160.9 has gone away a little bit, with wholesale fuel prices now up about 5 cents in that last fortnight. So I filled up the car and I filled the 2 jerry cans. Generally I don't like tugging weight unless I have to, but when I looked at what was going on, the Deer and Bandy service station hadn't had a report on the app for 3 or 4 weeks, and I didn't know if the station out there was open, or if there was the ability to get fuel at Deer and Bandy. So we set off on the Monday morning and drove from here to Gundy, or here to Gundawindi, which is about 221.4 kilometres. Fueled up at Liberty, Liberty, a bit unfortunate for Liberty, they're tucked around the corner a bit from the big BP and the big Ampol. Used to be a Caltex, but I guess the BP and the Ampol have good truck stops as well. But Liberty is traditionally the cheapest fuel in Queensland, cheapest diesel in Queensland, except for Toowoomba at the moment. So fueled up there at 176.5. So we took on 41.94 litres in Gundawindi at Liberty, returning 18.94 100, which was a little bit solid, I thought. Same leg last year, we returned 15.92 litres to the 100. We did push into a little southwester. I didn't think it was that serious. Maybe it was worse than I thought from inside the car. From there we had lunch at the Gundy Bakery. I think I had a wrap and my wife had a pie. Very nice establishment. As you know, I'm a bakery aficionado, self-appointed. I started the hashtag Great Australian Bakery Crawl. It's been very unsuccessful. So from Gundy, headed on out to Nindi Gully, pretty famous sort of a pub in Queensland, the oldest pub in Queensland, I think the longest continuous running licence in Queensland. Me being a bit of a fossil, I date back to the days of the Bachelor and Spinsters, or B&S balls out there. They were pretty rugged affairs. Not sure how someone didn't drown in the Moonee River. Anyway, a lot more sedated these days. Lovely place to camp by the Moonee River. Beautiful dark skies and a great feed at the pub. Really good feed at the pub always. if you really want to indulge, you head on out there and order yourself up a road train burger. You need to order one of these things, I think 3 days ahead. Takes a bit of a while to make the bun. We watched 2 people demolish one of these with a few beers in about 45 minutes a few years ago. Really impressed with their performance. My aorta was constricting just watching them devour that. Or if you've got a big party, you can participate in some of these other, even larger burgers. But again, the pub needs some notice, so you need to order ahead, 3 or 4 days. From the gully, or Nindi Gully, we headed on to St George. Fueled up again, took on 37.64 litres for 208 kilometres. So that returned 18.07 litres to the 100. A little better than the first leg, but not as good as I was expecting. The same leg last year, we took on 39.15 litres at 207 for 18.92, but did push into a really heavy crosswind on that particular 60 kilometres from the gully to St George, and it was prevalent the afternoon before in September as well, but the morning we went to St George it was brutal. And from there we came back a little bit and then turned towards Dirranbandy, and of course that wind was right behind us. So my next fuel was at Dirranbandy in September at 224, and that returned 13.88 litres to the 100. There was probably 30 kilometres of unhitched driving in that as well, but it was clearly evident that the tailwind was making a difference in the cab. So from Dirranbandy this trip, we headed down to the bakery, another fine establishment with a lot of outstanding sugary items that I didn't participate in. I just had a pie. They also really do a good job, so it's always important to support these establishments. Ducked into the visitor centre. Again, Dirranbandy has one of the better visitor centres you could imagine. Really knowledgeable people. And she told us that, yes, the service station had closed, but there was now 2 credit card outlets. Not sure why they weren't being updated by customers. And their price was reasonable, but in any case I had my jerry can, so I didn't buy any fuel there. We parked up at the Dirranbandy Caravan Park, which was actually quite busy. I'm glad we booked. Dirranbandy Caravan Park has, last time we were there in September, there was a mural on the western end of the shed, and Simon White Art had been back just after we were there. I remember reading about it, and he'd put one on the side wall of the shed. So there's also some interesting stuff in the park near the visitor centre. Another quite tidy, nice little town. So from Dirranbandy in September, we went to Lightning Ridge, Walgett, decided to turn around Pallamalawa, Gundawindi for a return of 15.68, which was again exceptional. Maybe 30 kilometres of unhitched driving at Lightning Ridge as we had a bit of a look around there. So this particular time we went from Dirranbandy to Thallon, which is not very far, 60 k's back towards Gundawindi sort of. Now Thallon has some painted silos, painted by Drapel when the zookeeper, from memory painted in 2017. And these silos are on an active GrainCorp site. A lot of people don't seem to understand that and enter the site blocking things and being in the road. Anyway, it is what it is. I don't run the site, so the reason for the visit to Thallon this trip was that they've recently lit the silos for part of the night, which just allows me to take a different style of photo. Poorly, I've photographed the silos under the Milky Way, I've photographed the silos during the day, I've photographed the silos just at normal night time, not thinking about the Milky Way. Probably done it all poorly, but there's a few things in the kit bag. There's also some, if you go out of town a bit and down a bit of a track, Drapel's also painted some local identities on the railway pylons. I see the other day he's back in town now, perhaps painting some more. So also mucked about with a bit of video. I'm taking some more video these days, probably because since I gave up work, dropped off the face of the earth for a while and have hardly left home, so the taking of stills has died off a little bit. So I mucked about with some 100 frames per second slow motion. That was kind of cool. Just videoed some cotton trucks leaving the depot, and they'd have been in there for fuel. There's a fuel depot in the middle of the grain port site as well, which is kind of weird. One learns quickly that one should take some sort of a pod when operating with the longer lens, be that pod, a tri or a mono. So there's also some new sculptures in Thallon since we were last there 2 years ago, from Dion Cross Sculptures. They're made out of things you'd find around and about a workshop, old spanners, bits of steel, old chainsaw chains. There might be some significance to some of the others, but there's one that's a baker doing some baking outside or adjacent to where the Thallon bakery used to be before it burnt down. So we headed down to the Thallon Hotel for dinner that night. Wow, what a feat. All these people that complain about how much these things cost, it's 2 meals for the price of one, and even at the price of one it's not expensive. I just can't eat them, they're just too much. I need to remember to take a container and hope that no one is worried that I'm taking a doggy bag. Really worth it, and I really feel for old mate in that kitchen, and he never seemed to show any fluster, or I wouldn't swap him his job for all the money in China. He just goes about his business coolly and calmly, and wow, he gained my respect. But we were sitting there where we could watch him, obviously. I was pretty excited to get to use the Noco Genius GB70 in Thallon. As I mentioned in a previous video, I'd only used it to start my son's Hyundai Veloster a couple of times. Charge phones and things on the go. We just pulled up at Thallon and unhooked, and this guy rocks around the corner and it gave me a bit of a shock actually. I was just settling back, relaxing, looking at the silos in the afternoon sun. He said, "Oh mate, I noticed you're unhooked. Could you come and jump start the car? We can't get it going." So they were doing some concreting. There's quite a bit of money being spent at Thallon on the rest area. I'll call it a rest area because it's a bit more than a caravan park. It's going to be very good when they're finished. I said, "Yeah, but mate, how about we try this first?" So when I got that out of the car and started heading over. Now I believe it's rated to start 3.2, maybe 3.5 diesels. I've never started a diesel with it. And the Land Cruiser 79 has a 4.5 litre V8 diesel, so I thought we'd be up against it and thought it probably might not work. But anyway, it didn't matter. I had jumper leads and I started with the car. So we hooked it up and I might hit the starter straight away. And nothing. I said, well, let's just give it a minute. So we gave it a minute or a minute and a half, and it did its thing. These lights were flashing away, flashing away. I said, right, go now. Bang, just started. Turned over 3 times and started. It's hard to believe you can get that much sting out of something like that. But anyway, it worked. So I brought it back and hooked it into the outside 12 volt. And it would use about a quarter of its power to start that. And that recharged in about 25 minutes. Which was quite excellent. Well, I thought it was anyway. So from Thallon, we headed back into Gundy. Lots of grain on the ground out there. For those of you that don't know, and I see some the other day didn't know, they were speculating as to what was under the blue tarps. But Thallon, Chibia, Tallwood, Bungunya all have a lot of grain, which will be wheat and or barley on the ground under tarps. And similarly at Gundy, even Woods grain across the road from Graincorp and Gundy has a significant amount of grain under tarp. So of course we fueled up again then in Gundy, and at Liberty I took on 63.07 litres, including a jerry can I put in Thallon, 354.2 kilometres and 17.81 litres to the 100. So progressively getting better, but still nothing like the previous trip. So that was my last fill point. So that gave me an average for that trip of 18.2 against an average for the September trip at 16.2. So significantly different, and not that much unhitched driving. Maybe somewhere between 50 and 70 kilometres. I should have filled up again when I got to Toowoomba, but I didn't. But I don't think it got any better. So we came home a slightly different way. We came home through Yallarbin and Englewood, but by the meter in the car it didn't get any better. The difference between the two trips, the trip we did in September last year, pretty much 100% normal mode in the car, and this trip in May of 2023 just completed, I used tow mode for pretty much 100% of that. So while I'm talking fuel, and when we go to Vivid next week, I'll have 1,000 kilometres each way to get a really good unhooked fuel run. The best one I've got so far on an empty run is from October of 2022. We had to go to the Brisbane airport to pick up our second son and his partner returning from New Zealand. So Toowoomba sits 650 metres above sea level, and the way I go, there is 16 directional changes and all points where you may have to stop between here and the top of the range before you start the down section. So we picked up 220 kilos when we got to Brisbane, so the young fella's a big lump of a lad, and they were fully kitted up with all their luggage. So the temperature, the day was 26 to 28 degrees, quite warm, no wind, beautiful day. By the time when I got to the airport, the car was reading 7.3 litres to the 100, and the error margin on that's 0.2 under, so that would be 7.5. We got it to 7.1, 7.2 running into Brisbane on that last little flat stretch there. So coming home, obviously we had to climb back up that 650 metres. We stopped for lunch, that's another stop-start. Anytime you got to launch these things, that's where you use a lot of energy. He's just off the track home a little bit, but that's another directional change, another stop. And again, another directional change when I left his place, so that's 18 or 19 from the top of the range. When I got home, the car was reading 8.3 or 8.5 with the error, 7.3 or 7.5 with the error at the airport. So there's some pretty easy deductive maths to do there. Tells me that on the home stretch the car's used 26.66% more fuel with that extra weight, and the lift ran at 9.3 or 9.5 litres to the 100 with the load and with the lift. So the carbon output for that entire trip was 229.5 grams of CO2 per kilometre, with a fuel cost at that time of 19.08 cents per kilometre. I guess this is the sort of stuff I do, deductive reasoning and figuring out how to make stuff work better. The average price of fuel for the trip in September last year, or the spring of 2022, was $1.97. The average price of fuel for the May 2023 run was $1.80. feels an interesting story, but something I'll cover perhaps on another channel. While I'm not qualified to give opinions on testing things to the extreme, my observation was that the Next Gen Ranger towed really well this time. Hardly any pitch at all. I was very impressed with the ride this time. Not so much on the first one, but I did pack a few things a little bit differently. Not that we had that much, but I got some more weight in front of that rear axle in the car. So the GCM on the way out on the first trip was 5,820. Didn't weigh it on the way out on the second trip, but if anything we would have been lighter because we were only going for 3 nights, and originally we were planning on going for 4 or 5 weeks on the first trip that we ended up cutting short due to the weather forecast. So this car's got a GCM limit of 6,400. So not that I ever want to get to that limit, but plenty up the sleeve, which is good. And I was impressed with how it handled on this particular trip. Be interesting to see how it handles when we go to Tasmania. There'll no doubt be a couple of 100 more kilos on board as we leave for that. So we have the trip coming to Vivid shortly. So it'll be 1,000 kilometres, a little bit down the coast will be ugly, and a little bit through Sydney and back through Sydney. I won't come home back up the coast, I'll come back up to New England. So we'll take out the coast and we'll climb the hill in a different way. So that'll be interesting to see what I achieve there. I have to put my fuel strategy together first, and we'll have some numbers when we get back from Vivid Sydney and Seafire.